We are going to talk about partnerships and what they can mean for you as you look to publish your work. We're going to give an overview of presses today and libraries today, and then talk about how we do publishing at Temple and our partnership on open textbooks and things that you might want to consider before you go this route. And please, I hope you'll have lots of questions for us at the end. So I just came back last night from the Association of University Presses annual meeting, where we talked a lot about, as you might expect, what's going on with university presses at this point in time. And there were multiple conversations among the directors and others about the sales challenges that we're facing right now. Presses tend to publish books in three categories. Certainly Temple publishes books in three categories: monographs, adoption titles, so textbooks, and trade. And we're seeing real challenges in the textbook course adoption area as students are purchasing fewer books, and so our sales are definitely going down. And as Annie will talk about in a bit, the library budgets are they're severely constrained at this point. Part of what's going on with many university presses is that they are now part of their university library. About 25% of the presses that are members of the Association of University Presses now report into their university library. That's true for Temple, and it's true for a press as large as MIT. So this happens across the spectrum of presses right now. And there were lots of conversations, lots of sessions at the meeting on incorporation of open access in a sustainable way for presses. And we're going to talk about one of those possible sustainable incorporations and partnerships on OA as we get into this. So I think I know all of you must know that the publication of textbooks for those core large enrollment classes is pretty much, for the most part, outside of the purview of many university presses. We at Temple publish a lot of what we call supplemental texts. So, for those classes, the upper level undergrad, grad student classes where there may be one or two or three paperback texts assigned to supplement the instructor's lectures and whatnot. And sometimes students will only use portions of those books. And partnering with the library, certainly in our case, has provided a lot of opportunity to think differently about what we're publishing and how we're publishing it.
All right, so Mary Rose gave you a little bit of an overview about university presses. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is happening in academic libraries. There are kind of a couple of different things that are all related that are contributing to libraries getting involved in publishing. And the first is simply what Mary Rose already mentioned: rising subscription costs. Over the past 10 years or so, library collection budgets have remained pretty much flat. But the cost of big bundles of journals has just risen exponentially. And I'm talking about journal packages from a few major publishers like Elsevier and Wiley and Springer, to the point where it's just unsustainable for libraries to keep purchasing these journals because they have no more money to purchase anything else. And that's certainly affected the university press book market as well too. It's also created this kind of weird tiered system of access among universities, where the wealthiest universities like a Harvard or a Yale, they have access to every single journal that their faculty or students could need. And universities like Temple or community colleges, for example, really don't have access to everything, which makes it a lot harder as a faculty member, which maybe some of you are already familiar with, when you don't have access to the research that you need. So because of this development, libraries have been trying to find a way to basically change scholarly publishing for the better. They feel like okay, we can't just sit back and continue to pay these costs. What can we do? How can we actually like make meaningful change in this system? And one way that they have, libraries have really been pushing for change is by embracing open access. How many of you are familiar with open access? Most of you, okay, good. So open access is a scholarship that is free to read and reuse. It's been around for a while, and librarians and libraries have really been at the forefront of pushing the open access movement forward. And what that typically means at a library is many libraries have an open access publishing fund that supports faculty who want to publish in an open access journal. Libraries also have invest in open access collections. So more and more journals that are flipping to open access kind of set themselves up as, kind of nonprofits and solicit support from libraries. So libraries invest in those types of collections. And then finally, libraries have their own institutional repositories, which are basically digital archives of academic research. And that's a way that they can, again, promote their faculty to make their work freely available to the world. The third kind of development in libraries that is important to know about is this growing push for textbook affordability. As you all know all too well, I'm sure that the price of textbooks has just gone up exponentially over the past 20 years, has way outpaced inflation. And academic libraries don't actually tend to purchase textbooks. It's not considered, just something that we do. But we do very much see this crisis firsthand because students come to us on the first day of class and they say, my professor assigned a $200 chemistry book and I can't afford it. How can I get it? Can you help me get it? How can I get it for free? So I think because in particular libraries are hearing this from students, libraries have really, taken up the charge of trying to convince faculty of the importance of using affordable materials in their classes. And that's taken a couple of different forms. One of the major ways that they've done that is through the establishment of what are often called textbook affordability projects, where libraries will actually pay their faculty a stipend to switch out their expensive textbook for either an open access textbook or library licensed content. So that's content that's not really free, but it's free for the students. And I think as libraries have been working with faculty to incorporate more low-cost learning materials into their classes, they've also encountered faculty who have said to them, hey, I just want to use my own material in this class. I have all these notes that I've developed over the years. I can kind of make this into a textbook or something similar to a textbook, and I can just use that and I can give it to the students for free. Would you help me with that? And that has really that's one of the reasons why libraries have really gotten into publishing, is just kind of helping faculty navigate this textbook affordability issue. So I'm kind of curious, how many of you knew that academic libraries were offering publishing services at all? A couple of you? Okay. Yeah, so it's a fairly new development in libraries. Maybe past 5 to 10 years. But it's a really growing service. There's even an organization called the Library Publishing Coalition, which is a professional organization of over 150 academic libraries across the United States and Europe, all who offer different levels of publishing services. So what do libraries publish? One of the big things libraries publish are open access journals, but they also publish monographs and textbooks and what you might call non-traditional research output. So that is a lot of born digital projects that folks are experimenting with today, might come out of a digital scholarship center or something like that. I'd say that there's a couple of characteristics that of what kind of a publication that a library would publish. And the first is that it's generally by their own faculty. So this is publishing services in libraries are generally considered something that they're doing for their own faculty. So libraries aren't necessarily, looking at the market and saying, we really need a new social work textbook. Who can we get to write this for us? It's, on the other hand, it's more like faculty are coming to them and saying, I want to write this social work textbook for my class. Would you help me do it? So it's a really more of a focus on their own faculty, versus university presses or other publishers who are looking for authors from any institution. And then I would say that the other kind of defining characteristic of library publishing is that almost all the publications are open access. So I think I can't think of any off the top of my head. I think you'd be very hard pressed to find a library publisher who published something that wasn't open access. Now that doesn't mean everything is free. Sometimes library publishers will sell print-on-demand copies, but those will often be, at cost, for example. So that's another kind of big difference between what the textbook you might get from a press versus a textbook you might get from a library.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about Temple specifically. This is our 50th anniversary. We're very excited about that. We have published probably in those 50 years just around 2,000 books. Our staff is 12, and we use a lot of students. We have at least the equivalent of 2 FTEs based on student labor. And we're really happy to be giving them hands-on experience in publishing, and a lot of our students actually would like to go into publishing. Some of them take the various internship classes in their majors. We get a number of students from the English department internship class. We also get students from the School of Media and Communications at Temple taking that internship class. And these students get a real credential that they can put on their resume, and they get a source for professional references. So we're really proud of our students. We published 47 titles in the 2018-2019 crossover seasons, and they were a mix of titles in the humanities and qualitative social sciences and on Philadelphia and the region. So we're not a numbers press. We don't publish in STEM. And we do qualitative social sciences, so sociology, things like that. We are known for publishing in ethnic studies. We launched a field-breaking series in Asian American studies that really, no one else was doing this. This was a brand new field just starting to develop. We do Latino and African American studies, urban studies, sociology, sports, women's studies, political science, criminology, gender studies. We think of ourselves as a social justice press. We publish a lot of titles that are then used in conversations about the need for change, social justice, marginalized communities, and we're very, very proud of this. So in the upcoming season, we have a couple of big books. We are publishing a book, Collected Writings of Alex Tizan, who you may know. He wrote the My Family Slave essay in the Atlantic. So collected essays of him from the Seattle Times, from the Atlantic, and that's a national trade book. We're considering that a national trade. So our small but mighty marketing staff is going to be working hard to get knowledge of that book out in the world. In terms of Philadelphia regional trade, there's an association in Philadelphia called the Mural Arts Association. If you had a chance to go out into the city while you were here, you may have noticed murals painted on the sides of buildings. That's them. It's one of the most prestigious public art organizations in the country. They did an installation, a group affiliated with them did an installation in the past year called Monument Lab. Giant public art sculptures, places for the public to interact with the art. We're doing a book with them. We have a couple of really exciting scholarly books coming out. We have a book series on religion and politics that is publishing another book. We also have started a little cluster of books in women in politics. So we try to keep up with things that are more and more relevant to our times and to society in general. All our books are, assuming there are no rights issues, all our books are available electronically. And most are available simultaneously in paperback and hardcover, except for some of the trade, which are hardcover only, jacketed, things like that. So it's a large list. It's a varied list. We have 3 acquisitions editors. They focus on specific areas. They each acquire in specific areas. So we are small, but we say we punch above our weight. So, which actually is something that I think is true for Temple as a university. You know, Temple is a public land grant university. It's in what at one point in time was a very depressed area of Philadelphia, a very urban school, committed to educating the urban residents of the city, and is really known for that. They have a number of professional schools, though, medicine, dentistry, public health, law. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. So they're big, and the press is aligned with a lot of the strengths of the university, and I think you'll see that, and you probably have seen that in the presses that you've worked with if you've worked with university presses. Well, now I'm going to tell you a little bit about North Broad Press, and I really hope Annie will jump in here. We, about a year ago, launched a joint press library imprint that we're calling North Broad Press. And this imprint is dedicated, as Annie said, to scholarly works from the Temple community. And we envision that including open textbooks, open monographs, perhaps re-releases of previously out-of-print books written by members of the Temple community. And all of these books are peer-reviewed, they're professionally copy-edited and produced. And they're made available, open access, with print versions available via print on demand, priced at cost. So we, in March, put out a call for proposals. We have a small amount of funding from the library to support authors in the writing of original open textbooks. We can give them a $5,000 stipend. So we put out a call for proposals for the first group of open textbooks published by North Broad. We got 19 submissions. We had 4 projects that we could fund. And this showed just a great enthusiasm for this among the Temple faculty and a need for it in the university. Faculty were already using creative ways to save their students money or create material that the students could get access to with no barriers. And they came from all departments across the university, which was really great to see. You know, economics, physics, criminal justice, social work, just a real spread. We actually were able to fund 4. We have 2 more in process where we are not paying the stipend, and then we had 2 that were already in process. We have a civil engineering and physics books coming up. We have 2 economics books, one of which is for what Temple calls intellectual heritage. It's a freshman level series of classes that freshmen are required to pick one from this lexicon, and this one happens to be on financial literacy, an incredibly important course for everyone, some adults probably too. And this professor has been working on creating his own course materials and is very excited to be publishing an actual formal textbook with us. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we want to do, is to publish these kinds of books. And that can have applicability well outside of Temple. That's also one of our goals. We're publishing a book with Temple Japan. Temple has campuses in Rome and Japan as well. With Temple Japan for use in the Bridge program to help students learn English, kind of get acclimated to the things that happen beyond Japan and help make that transition. Again, exactly the kind of book that we hope to publish. So You should see what's on the next slide that I might have. Oh, you're next. So anyway, we got all of these submissions. We're going to do another call in a year. And the stipend is $5,000. We pay it in two parts. We pay $2,500 when the contract is fully executed and $2,500 when we accept the manuscript. We're using, at the moment, we're using Temple grad students to do the copy editing. And we're doing a copy editing test with the candidates. They're also getting a credential, and the applicants have also been interested in publishing. You know, this is what they would like to do. And in fact, the copy editor for the first book is a press intern and is definitely committed to going into publishing. It's been a wonderful opportunity to involve the university community in new and different ways and to show the contributions outside of the more traditional, obvious ones that the library and the press can make to the community.
So since North Broad Press is still getting off the ground, as Mary Rose said, we have 8 projects in process right now, and our first hope to publish our first textbook in the fall, so just a couple of months from now. But wanted to take you guys through some examples of textbooks that have been published by university presses and libraries, so you can kind of see how they're, you know, the commonalities and the differences among them, because it is a little bit different. So the first project that I wanted to talk about was called American Yop. It's a American history textbook. Kind of an interesting story in that it actually started as a crowdsourced project done by grad students. They really just like put up this online website. They started, you know, writing their version of American history. It really took off. They had a lot of contributors, completely open access from the beginning. And just a few years ago, Stanford University Press got interested in it. Again, as Mary Rose said, Stanford is actually not a press that typically publishes textbooks. I don't know if they even have any other textbooks, maybe a few, but it's not a part of what they normally do. But decided to basically get involved and officially publish American Yop, again, already online. But they provided peer review, some copy editing, and they're handling all the sales of the print copies. There were no print copies before. It was just, again, purely online. Still CC licensed. Unfortunately, there's another session going on at the very same time about Creative Commons licensing. Are you all familiar with Creative Commons licensing a little bit? Okay, well, did you want to say something?
We've already had other sessions about it as well.
Oh, you have?
It
Okay,
gets
great.
mentioned. It's been mentioned in a couple of sessions during this conference.
Oh, great. I'm so glad.
I
Okay.
don't know how familiar these particular folks are, but we've had some discussion on it.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, basically, very quickly, Creative Commons sits alongside copyright and helps creators share their work more widely with others. It's pretty much standard. If you have an open textbook, it has to have a Creative Commons license because that allows people to read it, to share it, to potentially remix it, depending on the license you choose, without having to seek permission from the copyright holder. So that's kind of one of the definitions you should look for when people are talking about open textbooks is, does it have a Creative Commons license and what license is it? So in this case, for American Yop, theirs is a CC by SA, which means share alike. So anyone can use the content in American Yop, say a faculty member who's teaching American history at their institution and maybe they like some chapters of the book, but they don't like all the chapters. They can kind of make their own version of the book, essentially, and not have to ask permission from the authors. It's totally fine as long as they put this same Creative Commons license on the book that they create.
They do have to attribute. The BY means they have to attribute
Yes.
the work
Yes.
to who wrote it.
Right. Attribution is always important.
I would just add that Stanford is not one of the presses that reports to a library. So these kinds of things are happening in university presses that don't have formal library partnerships.
Okay. The next textbook I wanted to talk about is called Deep Learning by MIT Press. MIT Press actually is one of the few university presses who do regularly publish textbooks. particularly in the sciences, which is their specialty area. They also happen to be one of the university presses that has been at the forefront of open access publishing. And they're just beginning to start publishing open textbooks as well. And this textbook is kind of interesting in that it's kind of an open textbook. It's kind of not. It is freely available to read online, and the print copies are for sale. But it doesn't have a Creative Commons license. It basically, the version you can read online is this very simple HTML. The authors describe it as a very light DRM. The idea behind it being that it's there if you need it, but it's a really big book, so most people prefer to purchase a print copy. So,
Annie, can you explain the term DRM?
Oh yeah, digital rights management. So it's kind of, so by only allowing like a basic HTML version of the text, not having an easily, like you can't download a PDF or download a Mobi file or something like that. Basically, they're making it a little bit harder for people to read a long book. You know, most people don't like reading an entire textbook in their browser screen. It's not super fun. So they have a print version that's available at a reasonable price. I think it's $50 or something like that. And it's actually become one of their best-selling textbooks, interestingly enough. And as I think you can see, I called out here, and it's true with the Stanford book too, this textbook is not written by MIT faculty. The Stanford textbook is not written by MIT faculty. So again, just the different orientation where the library publishers are more focused on their own faculty, and university press publishers, as they do for monographs, it's not really an issue for them. So just to switch to some library published textbooks, this is a textbook called Electromagnetics from Virginia Tech Libraries. They gave their faculty member a $3,000 stipend to write this book. It is a CC BY SA licensed, again, share alike. What I think is particularly kind of cool about this textbook is not only was it peer reviewed by subject matter experts, but the faculty member also had his students peer reviewed it. So he kind of basically gave a beta version to his students in 2 semesters of his classes, got their feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like, then made revisions and incorporated it into the text, which I think is neat. Available in many different formats. Again, I think one of the hallmarks of library publishing is trying to make it easy for other people to reuse the text in question. So it's in print, it's in PDF, and it's in LaTeX, which the book was originally written in. And I guess it's actually in LaTeX, it's actually broken down into different modules. I'm not an expert in LaTeX by any means, but I guess it's broken down into different modules so that you can more easily kind of, as a faculty member, choose which parts you want to use and which parts you don't and combine them and things like that. The last textbook I wanted to highlight is called Introduction to Design Equity. It's from the University of Minnesota Libraries. Again, this is another faculty member who received a extra zero there, not 15,000. I wish that would be, I mean, Minnesota has a lot of money, but not that much money. Yeah, $1,500 stipend to write this book. It is a CC BY, which is the most permissive Creative Commons license. It basically means all you have to do is provide attribution, and you can, read the book for free. You can redistribute it for free. You can even sell it online if you want to. You can remix it. A true open culture license. This is kind of an example of what I might call publishing light, which some of the library publishers do engage in. This book had no formal peer review. I think there was some copy editing, but it was more about creating something for this faculty member's particular class than it was creating a textbook that could be used, at many, many, universities across the country. And nice thing about it is that you can read it in Pressbooks, which, are any of you familiar with Pressbooks? No? You should check it out. Pressbooks is a really interesting publishing platform. A lot of library publishers are using it for textbooks in particular. Really nice reading experience online. In addition to Pressbooks, you can also download it as an EPUB or a Mobi. Again, very easy to edit. If you're a faculty member at another school who wants to take some piece of it and not use other pieces of it, very easy to edit EPUBs. But this is kind of an example of really specifically focus on a particular class, maybe not as broadly applicable to other universities. And I think at North Broad Press, one thing that we're trying to do, which we've talked a lot about, is kind of strike a balance. On the one hand, our job is to kind of help our faculty get their textbook out into the world, but we really don't actually want textbooks that really only work for the one class that they're teaching at Temple University. We really want to publish textbooks that actually can be used at other universities across the country. So that's kind of our own personal philosophy with North Broad Press, is to kind of be more in the middle, I guess. So publishing our faculty, but also really thinking about the broader audience. So Mary Rose is going to talk a little bit about questions you might be thinking about if you choose to publish with a library or a press.
Right, so we tried to capture all the things in the next two slides that you might want to consider or ask yourself before going forward with working with a library publisher or a press like North Broad. First is, what kind of compensation, if any, will I receive? So obviously these books are open access, freely available online, and in our case the print versions are sold to cover manufacturing. So there are no author royalties for these books. We do offer a stipend. Most library publishers do try to offer stipends to their authors. It's an acknowledgement of the tremendous amount of work that goes into creating these books over years. In many cases, they've been refined by the professor after using them, in multiple classes. So we do offer a stipend. And in some cases, maybe it's possible for you to get a little bit of course relief or committee relief. Do you get to choose your own license? For North Broad, we do let the author choose. We explain the benefits and particulars of each one, but we have allowed our authors to choose. I believe all but one has chosen CC by NC, which is non-commercial. So that means that any reuse of the material cannot be for commercial, in a commercial product, or for something that they're going to charge for.
Oh, that's right. Quick question. So I guess it intersects what you were just saying. So are all the university presses then assuming open access
So,
for textbooks? No. Okay.
no, one of the big challenges, and we can talk about this too during the Q&A, is the sustainability of open access, because these are not cost-free to produce, not at all. And so the question is, where is the money coming from to support both the author and the publisher in the creation of these books? So not all presses are doing it. Not all presses can.
Yeah, and as Miro said, it's a small group of university presses who do publish just traditional textbooks, but particularly from those folks, they, I think, are maybe even less interested in open access because of the revenue that they receive from those textbooks. I think we're seeing more of the presses that aren't necessarily in that textbook space that are interested in open access textbook publishing, in part as another way to serve the university, to kind of give back, to experiment with new models, things like that.
Will this be peer reviewed? I think this is an important question. It's one of the tenets of North Broad. We have all of the work peer reviewed. There are differences among other library publishers. Some do peer review. I mean, Annie showed some examples there, and I think there was at least one that was not peer reviewed. We think it's important. Certainly the press would never publish a press book without peer review, and it's a very important thing, I think, in terms of showing it's a testament to the quality of the work that's published, in case there is any lingering concern that because it's open access it's not up to snuff. You know, we can say, and the author can say, no, my work was peer reviewed by, you know, 2 independent, maybe 3 in some cases, independent reviewers. And will it be copy edited? Again, that's another thing. I mean, certainly as a traditional having been in publishing for over 30 years, you know, copy editing is incredibly important to me personally. I was a copy editor way back when. I think it's important. Authors aren't, you know, you're not professional writers. You have far too much else that you're great at to you know, be a professional writer. So, and a poorly edited book can be a distraction, particularly for a student. So this is an important thing for us. And as I said, we're using Temple grad students, so, you know, giving them a way to be involved too. Will it be accessible to people with disabilities? This is an incredibly important question to ask. I know that accessibility is a big tenet for Temple as a university. It is for almost every, I would imagine every university, college or university at this point. The press's own books are accessible, although I'm embarrassed to say that we were just asked by a blind student if we had a version for the blind, and we do not. So we have a ways to go ourselves. But yes, the North Broad Press books will be accessible. What formats will be available in? Annie showed some examples of the formats. You know, is it just going to be able to be read online? Can you download it? Can you get an EPUB version? Those are things that I think authors should make sure they know about before they decide. And do you want a print-on-demand version? Is that something that you think is important for your book, or, you know, is it not? We've heard various things about print-on-demand. It seems that authors, for the most part, the authors that we've dealt with, are interested in having a POD version. I've heard from other presses just earlier this week, in fact, that there's very little uptake of it. But again, it's something that authors want to know is available. And how are we going to market this book? How will it be discovered? You know, one of the things that libraries are great at is creation of metadata. And one of the tenets of library publishing is on distributing that metadata, making sure that the books can be discovered that way. And so that's a big part of what we're going to do. I think that presses are still, and library publishers in general, are still working to get this down, though, because it's you know, discoverability for many libraries. That's discoverability, you know, on your own campus, and, you know, maybe in the local area, and it's through your library catalog. And we're talking about more than that. That's necessary for these kinds of projects. And I know if you have questions about that, Annie can certainly answer them. And I hope you'll have questions about all of this.
Just to add to that marketing question, I think it specifically applies to if you're working with a library publisher, because obviously, you know, library publishers don't necessarily have like a big marketing staff like university presses may have. So they might be expecting you to really be doing the promotion yourself, or be doing the heavy lifting, because they can't really provide that for you. All right, I think that's it from us, and we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Yes, please. And please, you know, email.
Don't forget to wait for the microphone. Can I let you go first?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm wondering about those of us whose libraries aren't doing this. Are there any library presses that are actively seeking, because like I have a textbook that's ready, and I've been really selective. I haven't wanted to go with some publishing company that's going to make a lot of money off of it.
Yeah.
Because I really want to keep it affordable for students. So just wondering, like, do you know of any presses or opportunities?
Well, Well, from the library, I can speak to the library side, and then Mary Rose can speak to the press side. From the library side, I think it is a question that more and more library publishers are starting to confront, because they are having faculty from other institutions kind of come to them and say, I just want to get this book out in the world. Like, that's the most important thing to me. And they do want that support. I've heard from 2 faculty members from nearby institutions to Temple that are interested in doing that. And we don't have the capacity at this point to take that on, but that's not to say it couldn't be in the future. So I think when it comes to considering a library publisher, I would try to find the big library in your area, and maybe they're the ones to approach. So in your state or in your city or whatever, and see if they might be willing to take that project on.
You might also check the Library Publishing Coalition. You might also check their member list. And I believe that there are brief descriptions about the members as well, and what they do. If someone is only doing open access journals, obviously that wouldn't be a fit for you. And I mean, in terms of the university press situation, I'm sure that you're already familiar with if there are any university presses that publish that would be appropriate for the book. If not, the Association of University Presses has a press directory on their website, and it includes a grid with the subject areas that they publish in. I don't believe it will indicate who publishes textbooks, though. So, yeah, I know. But
That was exactly my question. You kind of just answered it. How do I find the right university press for me? Because I don't have one at my institution either. And like you just said, I mean, I went to Temple, so I was going to backdoor ask you if, you would publish mine. But, so I don't know.
What's the subject?
Psychology. So I don't know what those rules are and how to find somebody else. And you just said that Association of University Presses has a directory, but they don't, have it by textbook. It's a textbook that I want to.
But they have it by subject.
By subject.
So at least you could, yeah.
Trying to think offhand. I mean, the big area that university presses publish in when it comes to textbooks is language learning. So if you have a language book, there are a couple different university presses we could point you to, but otherwise it's a little bit more uneven, right?
Definitely, but there are presses that have big psychology lists. So that's not to say that they wouldn't publish something that you're considering a textbook. It also is a lot of the conversations with presses in terms of textbooks are around the level and also your need for ancillaries, the instructor's guides and the problem sets and the homework sites and things like that. So I would not rule out a university press.
So university presses don't want to handle the ancillaries?
It depends. It's usually beyond the scope in some cases, but it also depends on how you want them handled. This is where the idea of open access becomes more prevalent, more relevant, because if you want to put those up on the open web, in a non-password protected way, not restricted to a specific course, not in a course management system, then I think that is something that a university press would be very interested in helping you with.
I have so many questions.
Thank you. So you guys know my story a little bit. We just met. And so in my case, I've got a book that's already done, like you have, but I've been actually marketing it. I have a website up, promoting it, using it, getting a couple adoptions in some other places. So I guess when I talk to you guys in more depth, we'll talk about what advantages or disadvantages. It seems to me that a lot of the advantages are when people are at that stage where they haven't written anything yet, and you've got the university resources behind you and all those kind of things like that. But I want to be clear at some point as to, like, if you just committed to using the university press as opposed to joining forces with the library, what the real differences are, related to like any specific book. So that's a bigger question, I guess, down the road.
I think it's it's very much a different set of questions if you already have the book done, or in your case, have already been selling the book. And, university presses can offer all of the traditional aspects of publishing, including royalties, selling and marketing a print version, creating an electronic version that goes into the various ebook vendors, that sort of thing. The partnership with the library would allow you to flip the access model for that book, though, to flip it away from a print purchase to a freely available online edition with no royalties, but and a print-on-demand version. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions related to what you already alluded to, is the question of sustainability. You mentioned this, I think, but where does the stipend come from that goes to anyone who writes this?
Yeah, it comes from the library budget, like our general operating funds. As I said, libraries are starting to switch how we think about collections to funding more open access projects. And so something like an open textbook, that libraries are considering that like a worthwhile thing to fund out of their budgets.
Sure. That makes sense to me. But then there's a part of the expense that is on the publisher. Is that also funded by the library, since you're...
Well,
It's just, it's hidden in overhead. Yeah, no, really, it's hidden in overhead. I think that sustainable funding is actually a question that everyone who's doing this is grappling with. There are some grant-funded initiatives that will support publication of open access work.
Right.
There is a initiative that's joint with the Association of Research Libraries and the Association of American Universities that is targeted to getting university administration to pony up some money to support publication of their own faculty's work in open access form, regardless of where it is published, as long as it is with a university press that has agreed to accept this funding. It's a complicated model. There have been some few books published this way to date. Unfortunately, there are only, I think, about a dozen universities who have agreed to do this, and 60 university presses. So we're a little off balance there. Yeah. But the sustainability question is huge. Libraries right. and presses together are talking about ways they can go to university administrations and see this as part of a university's mission, and to make it just a budget allocation from the provost or something, something along those lines. There's only so much money in the system, and actually I asked a unpopular question at AU Presses about this very thing, because it seems to me, given that there's a limited amount of money in the system, and it's basically all coming from the same set of pots, that this might result in a contraction of publishing options. Not every press is going to be able to do this.
Plus, books eventually need revision, and so this is not a one-time deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a similar question that I have I'm at University of Virginia, and we're part of a larger state system. And the legislature has now been getting involved, and I think they're almost at the point where they're requiring us to show that we're giving students inexpensive options for reading materials, which as a faculty member sometimes it feels very intrusive, but if we don't do it, I think the legislature is going to sort of start drafting laws, et cetera. So it's been a real conundrum to figure out how to do that and keep the kind of curricular pedagogical content. So the question I have, two, is one, is this kind of initiative part of a response to those questions of access and equity? And then the second part of it, which is more on the academic side, is it's kind of ironic that often when you're going for P&T, promotion and tenure, if your book is published by your in-house press, it is not seen as rigorous as if it went out on the open market. So perhaps this doesn't come up with textbooks, I don't know, but I know that's a real issue. So how is this going to be part of this bigger conversation, particularly for faculty?
Want me to start? So to your first question, what's happening in Virginia is actually happening in other states. I think Ohio just did a much more emphatic version of that same thing, and it is true in other states where legislatures are getting involved. And Congress has also mentioned it, but you know they can't get much done, so I doubt they're going to add this. There is the federal open textbook grant. So now, in terms of publishing with your home press, the only Temple faculty who publish with us are tenured. They're further down the road. We are not approached by non-tenured faculty to publish their books, and it's for the exact reason you said. And plus, we're also very conscious of not appearing to be a house organ ourselves. So it is those two things do sort of balance each other. I think for these kinds of books, you need to be in a certain point in your career to be able to do this. I think a couple of the people we're working with for North Broad Press are not tenure track, and then a bunch of them are already tenured.
Yeah, and I would say we've been told, at least by our faculty at Temple, that regardless of just publishing a textbook in general doesn't count for them for PNT. I don't know if that's the case for all of you. But so it doesn't matter if it's open access or, commercial press, they still aren't getting credit for it. So that's not really the reason why they're doing it, but we've been trying to at least work with them to get them teaching credit for it. And we've definitely been working to make sure that the faculty members who are working with North Broad Press, their department chair knows and is involved and is supportive. Again, trying to make sure that we as the library and the press can get them recognized in other ways and try to get them at least some credit that they can put in their teaching part of their portfolio.
We still have a few minutes left, and I was going to ask if I can flip this question just a little bit away from textbook publishing. So probably, Mary Rose, this is really for you, but you don't have a model that's analogous to this for monographs, do you? Where you're paying them for doing it and then having open access. You're still trying to sell monographs, right?
So the project that I mentioned, that's joint ARL, AU, whatever they are, the universities, that is for monographs specifically. There are also other opportunities to publish open access monographs. There's a program called Knowledge Unlatched, where presses submit books for consideration to be included in open access collections. The press receives a royalty payment for that, and libraries pay into that. And there are other things like that, but there's nothing at scale because, again, somebody has to pay. And there was a large study done by the Association of University Presses and Ithaca S&R, which is a think tanky research organization, on the cost of publishing a monograph. And if you put in all the costs associated with acquisitions, that cost is upwards of $25,000. Now, most of the funding projects are funding direct. They're funding the hard costs around production and throwing some money toward marketing and discoverability and things like that.
It doesn't cover everything.
No.
You can't mount an operation that way.
No.
You have to have an
No.
operation already in place.
Exactly. Anything you call overhead is never covered.
Right.
And I think that's kind of another reason why it makes sense for university presses to partner with libraries because, for some strange reason, many administrations in our universities really feel like the press needs to make money. And no one feels that way about the library. Everyone understands that the library is a service to the campus community that benefits the campus community. So, that's a good thing for something like this.
Definitely. Any other questions? I've got about 5 minutes. We can thank Mary Rose and
Thank you.
thank you.